In this video I would like to share personal opinions about the Anglo-Saxons and the Anglo-Saxon mind, which for me includes England, Scotland, white Anglo-Saxon Americans, and partly Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, and South Africans. But I'm most familiar with the English and the Americans. And Hegel says that individual opinions are worthless. Only what is universal is true. But at the same time, he says that consciousness cannot understand anything but what is within its own experience. So I cannot speak of what I don't know. So I will give my view of the Anglo-Saxons. And in case you didn't know, from a citizenship point of view, I am French. Spiritually, I identify as a German, which sometimes is difficult. And culturally, I'm a European, but most of the books I've read were written in English. So, yeah. And I would like to show you a picture. I don't know if it will be visible. From the book by Charles Murray, which he calls the European core, which is the geographical area which concentrates within itself the greatest quantity of creative minds in the realms of human accomplishment: artistic, scientific, literary, technological, chemistry, astronomy, biology, and so on and so forth. And for a reason which is kind of strange, I live as an empirical individual within the core of this European core. If you make a geometrical middle, I live right in the middle. And my mind is separated within Germany, France, and England, with a little bit of ancient Greek and Latin culture. But other than that, I am culturally and linguistically ignorant. And what strikes me, or what has had a strange influence upon me when I discovered Anglo-Saxon books. It was in 2017 I started to read a lot of Anglo-Saxon works. Is that the Anglo-Saxons, in their books, they put statistics and geometrical figures and graphs and quantitative data and facts everywhere. For a Frenchman, because empirically I have grown up as a Frenchman, it's so strange, because in books about politics, for instance, in France, there is almost no numbers, no statistics. It's only thinking. That's very, very strange. From a continental perspective, I would say, if I had to simplify that, the German are speculative. They are abstract, metaphysical reasoning. Not all the Germans, but the ideal German is a speculative metaphysician. The Frenchman is kind of a literary, kind of superficial. He likes the beauty of the words, and he's in love with his own lyrical flow of words. So the French are kind of superficial. but they are profound also. And reading French books in our country, a writer, in order to be a real writer, must write not necessarily poetically, but it has to be pleasant to read. The German, they seek profundity and speculative depth to the point of being very boring to read. In the German philosophers, from the formal point of view, it's extremely dry and boring and very strictly ordered, and the prose, the writing style, is boring and not pleasant. But the rational structure is satisfying for the mind. The French, a good French writer, it's always pleasant to read. And the English, the archetypal English, which means English and American and Scottish and Anglo-Saxon, if you will, his books are full of statistics and quantitative determinations and graphical illustrations, and that's very strange for a continental European educated person. And the way I see things, the Anglo-Saxons are kind of scared that if they cannot measure and quantify being would not exist. For an Anglo-Saxon mind, if it's not statistically measurable, it does not exist. And it's like they are afraid to say something which is not backed up and proven by data. Like they believe unconsciously that if they reasoned without the backing up of experience, they would lose themselves in the speculative clouds of some mystical or mysterious region. And there is but it's understandable, it's intelligible when one becomes vaguely familiar with the history of philosophy, is that every Englishman is the result of the history of English. And when I say English, I mean Scottish also, Anglo-Saxon, if you will. Every Anglo-Saxon is the product of the history of Anglo-Saxon philosophy. And every German is the product of the history of German philosophy. And every Frenchman is the product of the history of French philosophy. And in France, it is said that a good philosopher must be a profound thinker, but most importantly, he must write in a pleasant prose. Descartes was a good writer. Pascal was a good writer. Rousseau was a genius, a lyrical genius, and a very profound thinker. Voltaire, he was not a very profound philosopher, but he wrote very well. And Montesquieu had a superb writing style. And Bergson and Sartre, some of his books are very dry, and he tried to imitate the German mind a little bit too much. But Sartre was a good writer. There's this kind of arrogance within the French that they want to impress lyrically. They are kind of superficial, and I identified more as a German with my mind than as a Frenchman. So I criticize the French. So what is the most striking at first for a continental European when he discovers the Anglo-Saxon literature is the tremendous amount of statistics, numbers, quantitative determinations everywhere. And when one understands German speculative logic, one understands that quality and quantity and measure are one. So by quantifying everything, the Anglo-Saxon qualify things also, because this book that I was talking about, Human Accomplishments, it's full of statistics and data, but for a continental European to judge the quality of a creative genius by quantifying the number of times that he's been mentioned in an encyclopedia, because broadly that's what Charles Murray did, is very weird. You do not talk about Aristotle or Newton or Michelangelo or Shakespeare by saying, oh, he was a great man because he's quoted very often in encyclopedias. You can do it because in a speculative realm, quantity and quality and measure are one, but at first it's striking. It's a very weird way of paying homage to a great man, that just to quantify him, that's very strange. And I remember when I read the first time White Identity by Jared Taylor. The book is very rigorous, filled with data, statistics, quotes, extracts from newspapers. It's very well documented. It's a very serious work. It's very measured in a sense that it's not excessive. It's calm, and it's a faithful depiction of the reality of white America and white consciousness from the point of view of a white advocate. But what is striking with the book, it's utter lack of passion and of thinking, of I wouldn't say speculative, but of profound thinking. It's just an accumulation of statistics and quantitative determinations and facts. That's very striking, because and that was the purpose of Jared Taylor in writing the book, if the purpose is to help the white race save itself, you're not gonna arouse passion by listing quantitative determinations. It's very strange. That's because I had also read books by French and German continental Europeans written in English, but they were culturally, I think he was a Franco-German writer, and in his book there was almost no numbers. It was just thinking and writing. And the two books had the same purpose, but the formal aspect was so different. So, and more in the sociological sciences, the sociologists are trying to imitate the empirical Anglo-Saxon method of rationalistic science by gathering data and collecting numbers and making graphs. But there is, within the French culture, with which I am familiar because of my background, there are still many writers who write books, and very good books, which contains not any single number or very few numbers. It's when really they have to, but it's just writing, it's just prose. And I don't know if it exists in the American or English life. Of course it does, but to what extent? But yeah, I just wanted to share that with my audience, if they are Anglo-Saxons, that there are profound cultural differences between the Germans, the French, and the Anglo-Saxons, and all differences within the mind of the speculative philosophers must be reunited, but after having been differentiated. And yeah, so if I had to summarize, I would say that the German mind is speculative depth. The French mind is lyrical prose and a sense of pleasant expression. And the Anglo-Saxon mind is rigorous, factual, quantitative determinations. And eventually, if one wanted to unite the German mind, the French mind, and the Anglo-Saxon mind, one should adopt a speculative view, which would be empirically minded and also lyrically and aesthetically pleasant. And I am partly attempting to do that with cultural Hegelianism, to make German speculative thought empirically valid and aesthetically pleasing to the best of my capabilities. So yeah, that was just the remarks I wanted to share.